I've been studying spirituality for over 15 years now, and I've searched a lot for authentic knowledge and practices. And I have a framework to help you make sense of all of it: the microcosm, the macrocosm, spiritual beings, and the role of ascension in it all. And if you think it involves raising your frequency or shifting your reality, think again. With this framework, you don't need to subscribe to countless rituals, systems, and gurus. Because let's be honest, everyone nowadays online is a guru and they're all trying to sell you something. And it's all nonsense, at least 99% of it. All right, let's take a bird's eye view. We have the macrocosm and the microcosm. As above, so below. So we have the microcosm, which is man or humanity, below, and we have the macrocosm, what's above. I'm going to break both of these down, and I'm also going to explain the role that spiritual influences plays in all of this. To understand man, the microcosm, we have to make a division of man. Man, as you know, has the physical body made up of physical elements and matter. But I think we'll all agree that there's something more here than just elements and matter. Man, remarkably, grows up from a helpless infant to an adult throughout his life, right? Physical elements and matter don't just grow on their own, so there's something here driving this growth. This life force we call the etheric body. And man isn't just a physical mass that grows and dies. He lives his life through thoughts, feelings, passions, and desires. This we attribute to the astral body. And lastly, man has individuality. Unlike any other creature on earth, man says I through his ego. The ego in man, or his I, is the youngest member in the family of bodies, and it's what we in our earthly incarnation are supposed to develop. But okay, what's the point? To what end are we developing the ego? Let me extend the idea of the bodies real quick. You see this triangle here? It actually develops into another inverted triangle up. Beyond the ego are the spirit self, life spirit, and spirit man. You see, when the ego has drawn into itself enough of the spirit, the astral body goes through a change and splits into a more refined body and less refined. The more refined body is the spirit self. The spirit self represents the astral body that has transcended the chains of physicality or matter through its consciousness. By consciousness, I mean that one starts to have the awareness of one's link to the spiritual world, so much so that one chooses willingly to break free from the chains that are one's passions and desires. You remember that I said man lives his life through thoughts, feelings, passions, and desires, right? And that inner life was represented by the astral body. Well, man, on his way to becoming a more spiritual version of himself, must, through his own consciousness, choose spirit in favor of his attachment to his thoughts, feelings, passions, and desires. He must go against these things that tie him to physicality if he's to ascend in relation to spirit, hence the ascension. You see, as you move up this inverted triangle, man becomes more and more spiritualized, less and less tied to physicality. And each one of the bodies on the top are the transmuted versions, corresponding to the ones on the bottom. So you see, life spirit here is when the etheric body is transmuted. Spirit man is the transmuted physical body. And once these are transmuted, we will once live again among the spirit world in full consciousness. But I told you we're developing the ego in this earthly incarnation. So where and how do we develop this inverted triangle of the spirit bodies? You've heard of incarnation, right? I referred to man as the microcosm. Now let's look at the macrocosm. As above, so below. So the macrocosm must be something above in the heavens. what's in the heavens and has a long history of being associated with gods, planets, celestial bodies, right? Our Earth is also a being like us, but a much higher being. But like us, the Earth also reincarnates. Actually, the Earth is already in its fourth incarnation. Yes, before Earth, it was Moon. And before Moon, it was Sun. And before Sun, in its first incarnation, Earth was known as Saturn. And after this incarnation, Earth will be Jupiter, and then Venus, and then Vulcan. So you see, there are 7 incarnations of Earth. And you remember I told you the 7 bodies of man. As an aside, this is why 7 is a very spiritual number. There are 7 colors of the rainbow. There are 7 notes in the major musical scale, 7 days of the week, and 8 always becomes the first of the next scale or group. That's why 8 represents completion. Now, if we take the number 7, we look at the 7 incarnations of Earth, we can map it to the 7 bodies of man. And this correspondence means that during Saturn phase, humanity had the task of developing the physical body. On Sun, humanity had the task of developing the etheric body. On Moon, the astral body. And now, the ego. When I mention Moon, Sun, Saturn, what do I mean? Because there is a physical Moon, Sun, and Saturn in space today. Don't think of these of the celestial bodies that we know today when I mention these incarnations of Earth. Because in the earliest incarnation, Saturn, physicality didn't even exist. At least not how we know physicality today. Saturn in the beginning was almost entirely spiritual, but in it was the seeds for matter and the physical body. The physical body or matter developed on Saturn after long periods of time. And that is what kicked off the descent into matter or physicality. See, look at this graph. As you go down, humanity developed these different bodies. Think of them as like sheaths, one within another. The physical body on Saturn became more and more materialized, down until we get to the Earth today, which is as material as it gets. Hence, why everything in our modern society is about material welfare and why we have a capitalist society that literally runs off of our consumption of material stuff. And that's also why some people are so devoid of anything spiritual these days. Society feeds and rewards materialism by making hustle culture dominant, where everybody is in a power grab for money. And science as well. At least for the last 400 years, if it couldn't be proved by physical means, then it wasn't evidence. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. At this low point, we can only go up. And by up, I mean become spiritualized again. See, this is the point of all this channel, me doing this. On the one hand, we have materialism gripping society so tight that it can hardly move. But on the other hand, you have this undoubtedly rising resistance to materialism. All of these people are awakening. They're fed up with this way of life. They might not be able to pin it down exactly, but their intuition is telling them something is wrong. And quite frankly, their intuition is right. There needs to be a shock to wake us up to the fact that our evolution as a human race depends on us finding the spiritual again. From our descent into matter and our ascent back out into spirit. You notice that there is this interplay between the two. The macrocosm evolves into different planetary phases, while at the same time, the microcosm evolves different bodies. But what is driving this evolution? And are there other spiritual forces and influence at play here? We've all heard of an angel before, right? What about an archangel? Or maybe an elemental? What are these spiritual beings and why are there different names for them? It's because there are not one, but many of these different spiritual beings. And they each belong to a class of hierarchies that determine what tasks they are to complete for their incarnation. If we take man as the lowest, we have above us angels, and above them archangels, and then archai. Above the archai, we have the lords of form, motion, and wisdom. Above them, we define one more group of the thrones, the cherubim, and seraphim. And beyond the seraphim, we have the Godhead. So when people talk to God, many times what they mean is that they're talking to the angels or archangels, which are the closest to us, because we don't actually come into direct contact with God. But look at, it's just the framework I'm using. It's not the only way, and if you believe that you talk to God directly, I won't try to refute that. Because actually, in my perspective, truth is universal, and one of humanity's tasks on Earth is actually to come together in brotherhood, which means breaking down the walls of separation, especially in regards to spiritual or religious beliefs. So, how do these spiritual beings influence and act on the microcosm and the macrocosm? Okay, you've heard of a guardian angel before, one that helps lead your life and is at times in contact with you. Well, it's because each angel has the task in their incarnation to guide a particular person. That's their assignment for their incarnation. An archangel is more concerned about humanity as regards a group. Think of a nation or a state. The lords of form, motion, and wisdom are more concerned with the earth and its whole harmonious relationship with the whole universe. And the thrones, cherubim, and seraphim are concerned with the evolution of our earth into its next incarnation, which would be Jupiter. So all is good and well, right? Every spiritual being does their part and everything evolves? Well, no. Where we have evolution, we have devolution. And devolution in this means that each time there was evolution, there was also the possibility and actuality of beings staying behind and not evolving. These make up an entire sphere of lower beings. Okay, if you're still with me, this was a lot. I really appreciate you, and this is the last part, which ties everything together. We are mainly concerned with two groups of these lower beings. There's a Luciferic group and an Ahrimanic group. These are two poles of lower beings. In dogmatic Christianity and Catholicism, they've identified good versus evil as the two poles. What they fail to reveal to the masses is that there are actually three poles, and only by having these three poles can they ever be balanced to achieve inner alchemy. The third pole that balances Lucifer and Ahriman is Christ, or the Christ impulse. See, once upon a time, Lucifer gave humanity consciousness, but Lucifer wants humanity to have consciousness too soon, a consciousness that man is not ready for, one that makes man spiritual, but entirely automatically. He wants man to obtain the spiritual without free will. Ahriman wants the opposite. He wants to draw man entirely away from the spirit, and he does this through dry intellectualism. He also uses materialism to make man completely devoid of his spirituality. Ahriman is actually the great deceiver that we must guard against in our times. While Lucifer has already incarnated 3,000 years ago, Ahriman is set to incarnate sometime in the third millennium, which was the year 2000. And the only way that we can balance these two poles of negative influence is by the Christ impulse. The importance of the mystery of Christ and the crucifixion cannot be stressed enough. Christ had died and been reborn again of the earth. He transcended death, death of the physical body, and by doing so, he permeated the earth's etheric body. By the spilling of blood during the crucifixion, he literally made a connection with the earth's body. So now, through that connection, we can connect with him, though not directly. We can connect with Christ in the etheric through an archangel named Michael. The Christ event in Golgotha was the catalyst for humanity to transcend death and physicality. And only by realizing and coming to the Christ impulse is humanity able to lift itself out of the materialism that's plaguing society. Why? Because as humans get more sucked into materialism, they're drawn away from spirit. And spirit is what we have to come to. We have to come to spirit through our intellectualism, through our individuality, through our consciousness that is granted in this incarnation, granted to us by our egos. We developed the ego, and now we must use the ego to develop the next body, which is the spirit self. Hence why we need to come more and more to spirit so that we can evolve into the spirit self. Okay, we broke down the micro and the macro. We are in the fourth earthly incarnation and going through our human phase by developing the ego. In the next earth phase, called Jupiter phase, will be the angels for the beings that go through their human phase there. But there'll be some of us that don't become angels because we'll stay behind and not evolve. Evolving means taking on the spirit self through our egoic consciousness. Through our consciousness, we have to come to the realization that spirit is out there. And we have to lift ourselves above our I. We have to ascend the ego. And the Christ impulse is what helps us achieve this. While the legions of Lucifer and Ahriman, the lower beings, attempt to pull us down and keep us back. I hope this framework helps to give you a bird's eye view of the microcosm, macrocosm, and how ascension happens within this framework. There's much more detail to each of these topics that I didn't really get into, but I just wanted to illustrate this framework in hopes that you can use and see a way forward that provides some sort of structure. And I want to reiterate that no new age gurus or crystals are necessary. There was a time when a physical medium was the only way to get in touch with the spirit. But in our day and age, we need to come to know the spirit through our own consciousness, the consciousness that is granted to us through our I, through our egos.